In this tutorial, I will show you how to create a new hierarchy. The practice example data can be found in the exercise folder mapping training. And right now we just see the empty program interface. That means no mapping project can be opened. And only then I can see the hierarchy node at the top of the menu. So we go to hierarchy, new hierarchy. We first select the start path. And then assign the project name. Hierarchy Peterskapelle. Resolution and scale is not quite as relevant here because that is later controlled through the mapping template. We say apply. And now see the surface of the newly created and still empty hierarchy. On the left side, we see the hierarchy tree with 2 nodes for importing or creating mapping templates, and then in the second step for creating a project structure and projects. On the right side, we see the tool window for the later evaluation of the hierarchy by number of items, mapped areas, or by project data fields. And we also see the command to create a navigation map. For now, we begin by importing a mapping template. That means I go to the node mapping template in the tree on the left, right-click, import mapping template, and in the practice folder, Kartierungsschulung, Ausgangsbilder, we find a German practice example, hierarchy Peterskapelle, and in there is a template Naturstein map, and we open that one. For this particular exercise, we have no English version, so the German example will have to do. And then I can choose which classes and which groups I want to import from the template. And I say import. We assign a name to the template. We could call it natural stone, but we will stick with the original name Naturstein and say OK. When projects are created in a hierarchy, a link to an existing template is automatically set for each project. This means you can work with different templates. For example, if you work in the museum sector indoors, you can create a template for wood, for parquet floors, and a template for wall paintings or wall murals, and then perhaps a stucco template for stucco ceilings. So you can decide individually per project what kind of template you need. You usually have a project type or template type, in this case natural stone, which you then use for all projects. If there is only one template, it will also be automatically assigned to the projects. So now we want to create a project structure for our project in the second step. I click with the mouse on the node hierarchy Peterskapelle, right mouse button, and add sub-object. Here I have the option to break down my object by building parts, by floors, or by rooms. I'm name the first node Peterskapelle. And then I create a second structure node for the community hall. And then a third node for the gatehouse, for example. The project structure you see here on the left in the tree is the same one you will find later on your hard drive. That means each node is a corresponding subfolder on a hard drive, and at the end of the outline nodes, mapping projects are then created. And then you also find the individual folders of the mapping classes, which you can later distribute to different notebooks or tablets as needed if you want to map the facade on site with multiple people. So I'll start with the Peterskapelle and begin creating the first facade. That means I'm going to click on Create Mapping. However, if I have already created a project, I could also import mapping. There will be another video for this so that you can see how to compile a hierarchy from existing mapping projects afterwards. We go for Create Mapping, enter the name Facade North. And I set it to 400 dpi, 1:100, because we have reference image plans for that scale. Now I see a red box on the left in the tree, and that corresponds to the mapping project. That means black writing is for project structure nodes, and red is for the mapping projects. We create Facade East. Here below, I can also choose the corresponding mapping template. It means if I have different templates, I have to assign a template here. Since we have only Naturstein now, it will be assigned automatically. Change the scale again to 1:100 and apply. Create mapping. Now Facade South. And Facade West. So now I have created my first building with my facade projects, and now I want to edit the whole thing on a navigation map. So I go to the right on Edit Navigation Map, and that opens the navigation project. We now see the definition of the red mapping project and the project structure nodes, Peterskapelle, Community Hall, and Gatehouse in the tree on the left. We go to the project tree first, click on CAD drawing, right-click, import CAD drawing, and find in the German folder Kartierungsschulung, Ausgangsbilder, Peterskapelle, a small simplified floor plan of the object and say open. We see the import dialog for the CAD drawing and accept. Insert it to all groups. And now we take a small detour to discuss the topic of editing a CAD drawing. I see the name of the imported DWG file on the left in the project tree. When I press the plus node, I can see that there is only one layer that has been added to this file. And if I want to change the color or line thickness, I go to the name of the DWG file, right-click, and go to the class management. This means the class management will now be filled with the drawing layers. And now I can define display properties for each individual layer. We choose the color black, line thickness to 0.5, and apply. And then we set the paper area, layout paper area, select A1 format, but that is actually way too big for us because we want to print this navigation map as a communication map regularly as a A4 or A3 sheet. So we can later easily convey various contents of the project. That means we choose a scale of 1:200 or 1:250 so that we can print it small and handy on a A4 or A3 format. That means I go to project settings, change, and select the scale 1:250 and apply. We go to layout, paper area, and now select A3 landscape format. And then I have enough space on the left and on the right for the legends of the various quantity statistics. and I switch to the mapping tree now. And then I assign corresponding linking areas for my individual 4 projects, so north, east, south, and west facades, so that I then can display content in a navigation map through these linking areas, or open projects through the map with double click of the left mouse button. So I go to the north facade and take the rectangle drawing command, and I draw a rectangle here. Of course, you can make this look a lot nicer later on in your projects, but for this tutorial, we'll keep it fast and simple. South facade, and the west facade. And that means you always have to change the corresponding class for each project when drawing these rectangles. So that's all for now. We'll make sure to save the project and say close project, and therefore close the editing of the navigation map. We are now back in the hierarchy, and we see the tree with our individual projects on the left. And when I click on this, I can also see the color change to show me which project is currently selected. I can open the individual projects here with double left click, or with right mouse button open mapping, or as a third way I go with a simple left click on the north facade, and now I do a double left click and open the mapping project facade north. So we now see the mapping classes and the groups that we imported in the Naturstein template, and this is now automatically the same for all projects. I go down to left on the project tree, go to the node image layer, right mouse button, load rectify measured image, and in the German folder Kartierung, Schulung, Ausgangsbilder, Hierarchie, Peterskapelle, you will now find 4 files for the individual 4 projects. We start with the north facade and say open, and we keep the scale and position, and assign the image to all groups immediately. And in the layout, paper area, A2 landscape, and when I switch to mapping now, I see my groups and my mapping classes as we imported from the mapping template Naturstein. Now for the quantity analysis, we need the definition of the mapping area so that we can later evaluate for all projects how big the percentages of damages are that we mapped for the individual projects. We go to the All group and select the mapping area called Kartierungsbereich in German, and quickly draw it with 2 rectangles, one for the tower and 1 rectangle for the area of the facade. The total area is always taken for the calculation, so in this case approximately 250 square meters are allocated, and if I want to do this precisely, I can subtract window areas, door areas, or material changes using area tools for intersecting areas. It's up to you to decide for yourself depending on your needs. We go to the mapping area object in the top menu and assign the class Kartierungsbereich. And then I get the information that 251 square meters correspond to 100% for this project. Then I switch to the mapping class group Chartbild, and I make a few mapping entries as an example, simply to see the first result of the quantity calculation afterwards. I am saving the project, and I close the project. and open the Facade East project. I do this here with the right mouse button, open mapping, go to the project tree, image layer, right click, load rectified measured image, East Facade, and load image. Okay. We assign it to all groups. Go to Layout, Paper Area, Format A2 Landscape, and we go to the mapping tree and see again that the corresponding legends of the individual groups have already been created. In the group All, we select the mapping area Kartierungsbereich and assign the areas for the percentage calculation. That means the area of the tower, and now I quickly take the polygon command to measure the facade in a generalized way. We end up at around 245 square meters. And we go to the mapping menu, mapping area object, select the mapping area class, Kartierungsbereich, and have defined the calculation basis. We go to the chart build group again and map a few rectangles. Select the second class and draw a few more. We save the project. We close it. And with this preparation, I have now set up my projects, made my first mappings, so I can now quickly show the evaluation with the navigation map on the right. There will be an extra video for a more in-depth look, but for now I want to select the tab Count, my class Fehlstellen, and get the following displayed in the legend down here. 7 pieces in the Project North and 6 pieces in the East Facade. This is simply a piece count evaluation for the purpose of accounting documentation, where in many positions only the piece count is accounted for in the individual positions. When I go to the quantities card, the percentage calculation is activated. I select my Fehlstellen class again and see that I have now 16 square meters on the north facade, which corresponds to 6% of the total area. And so I can now automatically evaluate damage intensities for all projects in a comparative manner. And based on the gray areas here, we know that a calculation is not yet possible here. I have to go into these projects first and define the corresponding mapping area object so that a calculation is possible. Then we go to the project attributes card. Here I have the option to assign users to individual projects or responsible companies or a timetable. I go to the hierarchy, Peterskapelle, right-click and manage project attributes and create a new project attribute and name it timetable. Okay. We can assign new entries here. 2025. 2026. And 2027. And now we sort the colors. For 2025, we pick green. 2026 gets yellow. And 2027 gets red. That means that I can create any attributes here with the options at my disposal. And we go to the assign card for now. Here I will now select the projects that are involved, and I can select my various attributes. Not every project has to work with the same attributes, but in this case we can assign it to all of them. In the third card I can edit and define content. That means that if all projects are selected, I could assign 2025 to all projects at first. But I could just as easily be done with a double click on the east facade, which means all other projects would be deselected. And now I assign 2026 to the facade east. Then double click on the west facade and I maybe assign 2027 here. I say apply. It is saved in a hierarchy. And then I can now select my project attribute timetable here, and here below I have the legend 2025, 2026 and 2027, and it shows which project is to be worked on in which year, or when and where which scaffolding is to be placed. You simply use it as an organizational map to convey certain content for project organization purposes. And we go left into the tree again, to the mapping template Naturstein. And with the right mouse button, I have various options for how I want to evaluate data in my hierarchy or how I want to organize my projects. Using the pass on properties to projects function, I can inherit any changes that I made later in the template, such as adding new classes, etc., and inherit them to all projects. With the export quantities function, I can export the mapping content across all projects via the classic Excel export, meaning the projects are arranged in columns and you get the total sum across all projects. You have the option of a gap export, and the analyzing and purging classes function. We'll take a look at that one briefly. And in this window, you have an overview of all mapping projects at the touch of a button. And in this table, we are doing a pure piece count evaluation here. It's not necessarily about the quantities, but rather that you can see in which project have I already mapped a certain topic or not. This means that you immediately get an overview that the south and west facades have not been worked on yet, and the 2 topics have been mapped in the north and east facade. And the total amount is always displayed over here. And with this, you can double check a project relatively quickly and have a corresponding overview. There are then various possibilities. If I select a single class and right-click, then I can delete or rename classes in a hierarchy. I can remove classes from templates or adjust projects. And there will be an additional tutorial on this topic of class analysis. I close the class analysis and reach the end of this tutorial.